Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lawyer Interviews. I'm your host, Jeff Dillon, and today we're going to be discussing the ongoing legal developments of Andrew Tate. Now, with us today, we are lucky to have back Christon Halkiotis. Christon, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And as a reminder to everyone watching, Christon is a former prosecutor and a current criminal defense lawyer. She has all angles of the criminal trial system in the United States covered. So, Kirsten, jumping right in, as we know, since we've last spoken, Andrew Tate, he's been in detention for more than 30 days. And now his detention has just been extended for another 30 days. So, in your experience, under what circumstances do suspects typically stay in detention for this long without being charged?
So, in the United States, Jeff, the short answer is they don't. The United States, certainly we're operating under the due process protections that the Constitution gives us by way of the Fifth and the 14th Amendment, that you have a right to have notice of what you're being charged with. You have the right to be heard about that. And you have these protections in place. So here, that this is not a situation that we encounter here under our system of law.
So, pretending for a second Andrew Tate is in the United States, what would that process look like with identical charges?
So, I mean, he's going to have notice of what the actual charges are that are being levied against him. He's going to have the opportunity to be heard about his detention status, whether or not he's going to be held without a bond, whether he's going to have some sort of a secured bond put in place, and things like that.
Very interesting. So now, as we all know, Andrew Tate, big personality, he's a celebrity. What role does Andrew Tate's celebrity play in his treatment during this case?
Hopefully it doesn't play a role at all, right? In a perfect world, it wouldn't, because regardless of who someone is or what they say or what a lightning rod they may be for controversy, right? Everyone should have the protection of having a fair trial, of having a presumption of innocence, and having the right to challenge charges in that fair public trial.
So, is there a possibility there's political pressure for celebrities in general for systems to be either more strict or more lenient when someone is popular?
Well, I think sometimes, certainly when a defendant is a public figure, there might be more pressure on prosecutors' offices. Judges are certainly aware of the fact that this particular defendant comes with increased media coverage. Certainly, international media is following this case very closely. And so, you would hope there's no political pressure about it. But certainly, they all know, every participant in that system right now knows that the eyes of the world are on them and that they're watching how this case plays out in the coming days and weeks and
Yeah.
potentially months.
Absolutely. So, as part of this online persona of Andrew Tate, he makes a lot of controversial statements about women. A lot of people portray him as a misogynist. How does his online persona, you think, influence a judge's decision when evaluating his case?
Again, you would hope that it wouldn't, right? You would hope that a judge is just taking into consideration the evidence before them, whatever evidence the prosecutor's putting forth, and whatever, evidence is elicited at trial. But, certainly, again, judges are people, and this is a public figure who has made very controversial, very polarizing statements, and who seems to thrive on making commentary like that. And has kind of, if you think about the online feud in which he was participating with a teenage girl, which was sort of the underpinning for why he finds himself in this predicament, or at least why he was arrested at the time he was.
It's a good point to make that judges are people. It's impossible for them to stick their head in the sand and have no idea what's going on. In your personal experience, have you ever seen anything like this where maybe a judge had, probably because something was in the news, had some ideas about how they might feel about someone, and as a concern, either as prosecuting or as defending?
I've never seen a judge outright do something like that. But I'm sure, again, they're people, and I'm sure, and when you're aware of what's going on, and there is a public figure before you in your courtroom, and you are aware of media coverage, it's impossible to, to think that there's not something that might be influencing a little bit of a decision.
Right. So, in the same vein of bad facts or topics that are feuding, online feuds, evidence coming to light, we've seen that some outlets have released Andrew Tate's voice messages saying some things such as "I love R wording you," and people can interpret what that means there to an alleged victim. And he claims that this was just him being kinky or flirtatious. How can this message coming to light, how can this be used against him in court?
That could potentially be problematic. Anytime, generally that there's evidence of a statement made by a defendant, you always have to worry how the state's going to use that or how the government is going to use that, especially if they are charged with something that is similar conduct to what they have made a statement about. And in this situation, that seems, he's under arrest and in detention for potential charges involving human trafficking and rape and sex offense and things of that nature. So yeah, if I were his defense attorney, I'd be concerned about that. That's a bad fact.
Correct. To say the least. Now, hindsight is 2020. Would it have helped Andrew Tate to have maybe consulted with a lawyer before he released either any of his videos, any of his content, or podcasts? What would you say to that?
Oh, I will. When someone asks, should I talk to a lawyer? If I'm in a sticky situation like this, yes, the answer is always yes. You should talk to a lawyer. You should listen to what that lawyer tells you to do. And in a situation like that, I feel pretty comfortable saying any good criminal defense attorney is going to say, if you've started talking, stop immediately. If you haven't started talking, don't start. Draw as little attention to yourself as possible. Now would be a good time to probably shut down your social media for a while. Don't make any statements, avoid publicity, let things die down a little bit. So I think there's a lot of PR that's built into it too.
Yeah.
You just want to quiet it down, let that news cycle pass and just stay quiet for a while. But I think also, again, when you're dealing with somebody with an incredibly polarizing personality who seems to thrive on making comments like this, and then with the consequence that those comments bring, sometimes it seems a little bit, almost silly to think that kind of person is a person who would seek out the advice of counsel and then do what counsel tells them to.
Right. Well, this is unofficially an advertisement for all lawyers. That's what we're aiming to do here. But also, how would you balance, let's say your client, that is their livelihood in a way. That is the business of not just Tate, but other online personalities, is to be in the spotlight, to be in the media, and to be attracting more followers and business and everything like that. So how would you balance, if you were advising him, how would you balance the client's business needs with their criminal protection needs?
And I think that representing them and their interests in a criminal trial is so incredibly important that I think that's a situation where you're dealing with a potential client like that. Lawyers sometimes just have to say, look, here's how our agreement is going to work. And if it hits a point where you're not following my advice and doing what I'm telling you to with respect to being quiet, not talking, not putting polarizing statements out there, and not prejudicing your own defense, then I'm not going to be able to represent you anymore.
Okay.
And it's a tough decision to have, but it's one that you have to have if you are, dealing with a client who's in the public spotlight like that.
So there's not much room for compromise, is what I'm hearing, in terms of strategy, for legal strategy and your social media strategy.
When I'm protecting somebody's interests, meaning if I'm trying to prevent them from going to prison for decades, it's going to be, we're going to be doing it the way I'm telling you to do it. And if you feel the desire to make further statements that could implicate you, that could be used against you at a criminal trial, and that could put your liberty in jeopardy for a longer period of time, then that would be like me beating my head against a wall.
Very interesting. It's a good point to be made, and part of the conversation for people to think about here. You can't make money in jail. For some people, this should be the priority, but it's probably hard to balance that. So,
Sure.
we are not making any opinions on the legal strategies or, anything like this, but just what we're observing here. So last point here, Andrew Tate is apparently a big chess player. And a lot of his followers and fans will say that he is a strategy genius, a strategic mind. So in your opinion here, with the posts lately and with everything he's doing, did he make a wrong move with any of these statements strategically?
Yeah, and I think that that's the point where it would almost seem like he's got a little bit of a hair trigger just from the outside looking in, and when it appears that he gets so worked up that he has to goad Greta on social media, right? And then his arrest happens after as a result of his social media post. It seems that, sometimes anger can cloud strategy, and it
Mhm.
can cloud, a clear head, and you have to have a clear head to execute good strategy. And again, I would say it would go against any advice that I would ever give a client in terms of making public statements when you know you're being watched and you're in a situation like that.
So would the next strategic move be to go dark, to be quiet?
I mean, that I feel like that that sort of passed a while ago. But yes, I mean, it's starting now. Yeah,
It's an ongoing situation. You can't
it is.
change the past, but people
Right.
are going to continue to see how this case develops, see what kind of moves are being made. And Kristen, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It was great. So everyone stay tuned as we continue to monitor for updates.